So, good afternoon or good evening, Doc Yang and classmates. Our topic for today is all about learning, memory, and amnesia. So, learning and memory. Learning is the acquisition of knowledge, how we get knowledge, and memory is the retaining and reconstructing knowledge. So, what we retain pertains to our memory. Then, memory. So, there are encoding, storing, and retrieving, which is the main processes Jude when it comes to memory. Next, we have the stages of memory. So, sensory, short-term to long-term. So, gikan sa imong sensory, for example, from the sense of sight, kita ka sa imong crush. So, it is now being identified, organized, and interpreted by your brain. That's why you respond dayon, like magpagwapa ba ka, and those things. And for those things nga dili ka importante for you, so dito ra gyud siya kutob sa short-term memory, and it can be lost if it's not really given a proper attention. While the one you reviewed or rehearsed o kanang gitagaan jud nimong importansya o meaning, then it will be stored in the long-term memory. In other words, mo take time gyud siya, depende kung unsa ka importante na nga tawo, lugar, panghitabo o mga butang nga imong na-experience or imong that you possess. So, this will be stored in, depending, it will be stored in either of these two different memory. It's either short-term or long-term. So, we have sensory memory, high capacity and fades quickly. Then, sensory memory. Stimuli from the senses move into different registers. Visual stimuli to the iconic register, auditory to echoic register, and etc. So, short-term memory, limited capacity, requires attention. Just like what I said ganina, for those things that dili ka importante nimo, so it can be temporarily stored in the short-term memory. So, short-term memory is the capacity generally around 5 to 9 items. Chunking can be used to group material together to make meaningful lists. For example, given different cities or countries and chunking them into different groups based on geographical proximity. Short-term memory can also hold retrieve from long-term memory for temporary use. This is called working memory. So, in chunking gyud, useful gyud niya siya, especially kung katong mga dinagko na, like chunking, atong mais-maison, and also those information that is from the long-term memory, we retrieve it. So, that is called the working memory. So, we have the long-term memory. No clear capacity limit, indefinite retention time. It requires time, Jude. So, here as you can see, we have the long-term memory. So, it has two, explicit and the implicit. Explicit is declarative, implicit is non-declarative. So, under the explicit, we have episodic and semantic. So, episodic is the experience events, imong na-experience. Semantic is the general knowledge and concepts that you have. Then the implicit, we have two, procedural skills and actions, emotional conditioning, associations. So, as you can see, ang long-term memory, gidivide siya og two, diba? Sa first, kanang sa explicit, mainly facts, good siya, and events. Maunang episodic experiences of events are, and the semantic, which is the knowledge and concepts, while implicit makaapekto gid siya sa atong thoughts and behavior. So next, memory in the brain. We have the hippocampus, encoding and retrieval of memories. So, siya day ang responsible nga mo encode sa message or the information that we have, and also at the same time, if we are ready to use that information, then it can be retrieved in the present. Next, we have the nightmare fuel. And then, we have the amygdala. So, the amygdala involved in the emotional aspect of the memory. So, part sa amygdala ang basic emotions like happy, sad, fear, disgust, anger, and then surprise. Then we have the cerebellum, involved in procedural memory or the motor skills. So, ang motor skills is the movement ni siya sa mga muscles. Like for example, mo play tagbike, mo ride tagbike, mo run or mo walk. So, it requires movements of the muscles, jud, as you can notice. So, next we have the learning. So, we have the Hebbian theory. Modern thinking of the neural mechanisms of learning began with Donald Hebb as Canadian psychologist. He argued that enduring changes in the efficiency of synaptic transmission was the basis of learnings. The basis of the theory, when our brain learns something new, neurons ma-activate ang neurons and connected other neurons and forming neural network. So, from neurons to neurons, it will be activated, it will be stimulated, and it will connect to other neurons, forming a neural network. So, next, we have the long-term potentiation, the strengthening of synaptic connections with repeated activation. Then we have the NMDA receptor mediated LTP. And then we have, let's move on to amnesia. We have two kinds of amnesia, the retrograde backward acting and the anterograde forward acting. So, let's have the slide first. So, what is anterograde? It is forward acting, right? So, this refers to the impaired capacity for learning. So, ma-impaired nanay diferensya. It's not impaired. So, malfunctioning. Not being able to function well. While retrograde amnesia, simply kanarang information, mawala rang mga information nga imong mawala siya at the beginning of amnesia itself. So, next we have the medial temporal lobe amnesia. Refers to patients with mnemonic deficits with preserved intellectual functioning, retention of the ability to create implicit long-term memories, and the loss of the ability to form explicit long-term memories. So, once nakaani, it's kind of like memory disorder wherein the injury of the temporal lobe is that makaprevent siya sa formation sa bagong memories. Next, global cerebral ischemia. Those who experience an interruption of blood supply. Ang hemorrhage is bleeding in the brain, while the cerebral ischemia is the lack of blood supply or interruption of blood supply to their entire brains. People who suffer from global cerebral ischemia often suffer from temporal lobe amnesia. So, kung manapog ka ani, ang blood flow sa imong brain is reduced or interrupted, munang mo resulta siya og cardiac arrest. So, wala na function imong heart, wala na kay ginhawa, wala na pugkay panimuot or consciousness. Next, we have the transient globe amnesia. So, this is the sudden onset in the absence of any obvious cause in otherwise health adults, lasts between 4 to 6 hours. So, kung manapog ka ani, di po ka makarecall sa mga recent nga panghitabo, di ka makahinumdum kung asa ka o ug nganong napunta kaanang lugara. Next, we have the Korsakoff's syndrome. So, memory disorder common in people who have consumed large amounts of alcohol, generally attributed to brain damage associated with thiamine deficiency that often accompanies heavy alcohol consumption. Damage is typically found in the medial thalamus and medial hypothalamus. So, posible nga prolonged vomiting, imong eating is dili na siya order, you will have eating disorders will occur, and then your consumption of large amounts of alcohol. So, kabahan na ang mga palahubog. So, next, we have the Alzheimer's disease, a terminal progressive disease that often starts with mild deterioration of memory. Dementia eventually develops and becomes so severe that the patient becomes incapable of simple activities. Memory deficits are more general and diffuse. Low levels of acetylcholine resulting from the degeneration of the basal forebrain. So, kung manapog ka ni, imong brain mo gamay, so gitawag na to nag-atrophy when the brain shrinks. O ang brain cells pod mamatay. Mo ni siya common cause of dementia. So, a conscious declining in thinking. So, magkahiminus-minus imong panguna-una, imong thinking skills, imong behavioral pod, imong behavior maapekturan, imong social skills pakighalubilo sa ubang tawo, maapekturan pod ni ang iyang ability to function independently. So, magsugod ni siya mga between 30 to 60 years old. So, next we have the post-traumatic amnesia. So, amnesia following a non-penetrating blow to the head, pathological state of unconsciousness following a severe blow to the head. The patient experiences confusion upon regaining consciousness and have permanent anterograde amnesia for events during the period of confusion and permanent retrograde amnesia for the events leading up to blow. So, kung manakaani, disoriented yung ka, and dili na ka makahinumdum sa mga events after sa panghitabo sa injury that you experience, that you have, the person may be unable, dili pod sila ka state sa ilang name kung asa sila o kung unsa ng urasa. So, last, we have the a blow to the head produces coma. When the victim regains consciousness, there is a period of confusion. When the period of confusion ends, the victim has retrograde amnesia for events that occur during period just before the blow, and anterograde amnesia for events that occur during the period of confusion. So, kaning coma, muna siya prolonged unconsciousness that cause a variety of problems such as traumatic head injury, stroke, brain tumor, kanang drug, alcohol intoxication, or lain-lain nga sakit such as diabetes or having an infection. So, as what you can see in the illustration below, kanang naay normal cognitive function, retrograde amnesia, coma, confusion, and anterograde amnesia, and then normal cognitive function. So, as what you can see in the illustration below, una na, normal pa ang functioning sa brain. Sunod, ana, mawala na ang information, that is retrograde. Sunod, unconscious na siya. Di na kayo siya aware. Then, muna na siya coma. Sunod na diri ang confusion. Then, impaired capacity for new learning, mauna ang anterograde. So that will be the end, and thank you for listening.